friends. Welcome to our Midweek Moment. Pastor Nicole here. So glad you clicked on. Well, this week we continued on in our sermon series, Haunted Heart, exercising the demons that possess us. And we talked about shame and the demon of negative self-talk. And Lee Hager brought us the sermon this weekend. She did an incredible job with it. I was really moved by her words and all that she shared with us. One of the things that she brought up was the work of Brené Brown. And I wanted to dig a little deeper into what Brené Brown talks about around shame. If you're not familiar with Brené Brown's work, I would highly recommend you Google her and find some information. She has a really great TED Talk. She has a Netflix special. She's so good. She is so smart, and she just has such interesting research to share, particularly around shame and around vulnerability and the importance of kind of working through those things in our lives. So can't recommend her highly enough. She has a lot of wonderful books as well. In the sermon, Lee talked about Brené Brown's work around shame versus guilt. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. So Brené Brown says that there's a difference between shame and guilt, because guilt is when we do something bad. Shame is when we say, I am bad. And so we might think about, like, in our lives, we've all done things that we felt guilty about, right? Or that we're like, oh, why did I do that? Why did I say that? So maybe we will say something to somebody and we'll think, oh, why did I say that? That was bad. I should not have said that. That's different than when we think to ourselves, why did I say that? I am bad. Do you see the difference? Like, we all do things that we're not proud of. We all do things that we feel guilty about and we wish we hadn't done, or we wish we could take back. But there's a difference between doing something that's bad and thinking that we are bad. And the root of that for me lies in the fact that God says not only that we are good, but that we are very good. And so you might remember back in the creation story when God is creating everything and he goes through each day and, he creates the land and the waters, and he says that it's good, and he creates the planets and the stars and everything in the skies and says that it is good, and he creates plants and all the way down, right? And he gets to the sixth day and he creates humans and he says, it is very good. And so when we live in the land of shame and we look at ourselves and we say, I am bad. At my core, I am a terrible person. I'm an awful person. I'm bad. That is in direct contradiction to what God says when God looks at us. Because God created us and created us in God's own image. And we are not only good, but we are very good. That doesn't mean that we don't do bad things sometimes, right? But the shame spiral comes when we get stuck in that land of, I am bad. I'm terrible. I only do bad things. And that is where the demon of negative self-talk kind of takes over. Now, sometimes in our lives, we have shame put upon us, where somebody is telling us that we should feel ashamed or that we are bad. Other times we do that to ourselves. We get caught in that shame spiral and we believe at our core that we are bad. But sometimes we need to step outside of ourselves and take a look at ourselves the way God sees us. Because God says that we are very good. And so when we can leave that shame behind, we can live into the freedom of who God wants us to be. I really love the story that Lee shared this weekend of the woman who receives healing by touching the hem of Jesus's garment, and that he calls her daughter. And in that moment kind of removes all of the shame that had been piled upon her, because she, for 12 years, had been considered unclean. And so that's a case where all these people were like looking down on her and casting shame upon her. And she took that on, because how could you not, right? When you are considered unclean for 12 years. And Jesus, in one word, changes everything. Daughter, he calls her daughter, and calls her into this space of not feeling shame, but of realizing that she is God's child, that she is very good. I think sometimes when we find ourselves kind of in that spiral of shame, we might need other people in our lives to remind us that we are indeed very good. We might need to hear that from somebody else. Sometimes we get so stuck in our own negative talk that we need somebody else to speak into our life. I think that Lee talked a little bit about kind of the importance of like naming shame, of recognizing it, naming it, so that then you can move on. She talked a little bit about how a therapist had kind of helped her be able to do that as well, to like let go of this negative self-talk about her and understand who she is and who God created her to be. Sometimes we need therapists in our lives to help us do that. I don't know if you're getting like the resounding message of this series is that we need to, when we're feeling haunted, we need to name the issue and seek out therapists to help us, or other people to help us process, because it's hard to get rid of these demons on our own. We've talked about this, I feel like, week after week. Sometimes we need that outside perspective, somebody to speak truth into our life, because shame grows and breeds in the secret places of our hearts. When we are telling ourselves, I'm not good enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not cool enough, I'm not whatever enough, when we are telling ourselves those things, that in our hearts continues to grow and grow and grow until the shame is so overwhelming that we can't get out from underneath it. And so we need other people in our life to be like, why are you saying that to yourself? It is not true. That is not true. God says that you are very good. And so if you are experiencing that shame spiral, if you feel like you hear that negative self-talk in your head, let's find a way to get you out of that, because that's not who God created you to be. That's not who God wants you to be. God calls you daughter, son, child, beloved, beloved, beloved. So let go of that shame, exorcise that demon, banish it from your life, get rid of it. It's not serving you well. And God doesn't want you to carry around that weight. So just a few thoughts on shame as we I've just have continued to contemplate what Lee shared with us in the sermon. I hope you are as well. And I hope you will join us this weekend. We're going to wrap up our series by talking about addiction and the demon of self-comfort. And, you know, a lot of times when we think addiction, we think, well, I don't have an alcohol problem. I don't have a drug problem. I don't really have an addiction problem. But I think most of us have things in our lives that are controlling us to some degree. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that this weekend. I hope you will join us in person or online. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see y'all later. Bye.